So we're like, welcome, everybody. Today is Tuesday, April 22nd. This is the Democratic Caucus. And we have a few announcements, a few topics to cover today, and then we'll make sure folks are out by lunch for sure. It should be a shorter meeting. So a couple of announcements, and then I'm going to have our guests share their announcement as well. This is a time of a lot of hearings that are coming up. So we have a public hearing. Is it today? Yeah, it's today that housing is doing in room 10. This is on Prop 3. And that will be coming to the floor. A little music interlude here. I'll be coming to the floor probably beginning of May. So it's a public hearing on that. And there's another hearing that is happening next week on Wednesday, April 30th. That's at 4 p.m. And that's going to be with DevOps on the state of Veterans Affairs in Vermont. And those are both listed on the legislative website, so you can get details, share it with constituents for either of those hearings. And then there also is a student education hearing on Friday from 1 to 3. There was an email that went out with that as well. So these are opportunities for you to share with constituents, let them have their voices heard on these issues. So those were the announcements that I had. And then we have some guests, the Green Mountain Boys that are here and would like to share an announcement as well.
Yeah, please. And thank you so much for giving us a moment of your time.
You, Mike.
You may have. Thank you. You may have heard this past weekend on April 19th, the start of the American Revolution, 250 years ago. And with us today, we have our modern Ethan Allen. Can you share with us Ethan Allen's thoughts after Lexington and Concord?
Of course. The first systematic and bloody attempt at Lexington and Concord thoroughly electrified my mind, and I was determined to take part with my country.
So the shot heard round world, everyone's heard that, right? Well, what comes next? And what comes next is uniquely Vermont's story. It's Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys, the captures of the forts at Ticonderoga and Crown Point, America's first offensive victory of the Revolutionary War. So we're here in part to let you know about May 3rd and 4th. That is our weekend in southwestern Vermont, where we celebrate the shared history of Vermonters telling the story of Ethan Allen and that capture. And then after leaving Bennington County on May 3rd and 4th, the story continues in Castleton.
From 6 to 8 p.m. on Friday, May 9th, Ethan Allen in Castleton with a dramatization, playwright Jim Thatch composed, and which will follow a parade, a history parade through town. So kind of a big special celebration that Castleton only does every 50 years. So yeah.
By the way, those words you heard our modern day Ethan Allen say were an exact quote of Ethan Allen from that time period. And as we were grateful then, we are grateful now for your time. Thank you very much. Yes, we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Also, to let you know, over the next couple of years, there will be many another 250th anniversary events going on around the state. It's our state. Let's celebrate our 250 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay, so we have two speakers that are going to come up and share about some upcoming bills. So first, we're going to have Chair Durfee come up and talk about a bill that is going in with ag. And we'll open it up for questions. I'll give them up to use this mic.
Morning. Not sure our words will be as electrifying as. And well, this bill is actually slightly less controversial than the topics we just heard about, I think. So S60 creates a new fund, a special security fund for farm and forestry operations to provide assistance after climate disasters. 2 summers ago in July, after the heavy rains, a number of farms across the state were decimated, might not be the right word, but severely impacted. And DGAT funding that was set up at the time provided assistance for businesses, including farms. It did not cover forestry operations. So F-60, which passed out of the Senate several weeks ago and now is in our committee, also did not include forestry operations. We've decided to add it. So this provides assistance for both farms that suffered losses related to severe weather events and logging operations. The kinds of weather events that are covered are listed in the bill. It's intended to be inclusive. It ends with other possible events as well. And it leaves to the board's discretion of what events might be covered. There is no funding in the bill that we're going to be passing, hopefully out this week, possibly even this afternoon. It will go to appropriations because originally there was money in it. The Senate is working on the budget right now, and I don't want to predict what will happen, but our version of the budget did not include funding for this fund originally. Maybe Michelle would like to add, Representative Oslin would like to add some details.
Yeah, just one thing I think that's significant about this, as opposed to the federal funding that came in after the disasters a couple of years ago, is that the hope is that this is going to be a fund that's going to be available quickly. So there are some folks who had suffered from early frost and lost their fruit, and they're still waiting for the money. Supposedly the money's coming, they're still waiting from 2 years ago. And so the idea with this is that we're going to establish a fund. Some of the funds could come from the State House, some of the funds could come through private donors and philanthropists, but if we have this fund and we have a review board that can look at situations where harm has been done, hopefully it can help those farmers to re-up, clean up, get going again in a way that they'll actually be able to save something of their season, because the way the federal government is able to do it, or what we've been able to do as a state, hasn't been adequate so far, and some of our farms have closed as a result.
And you said it hasn't been voted out yet, but this week?
Yeah, it's on our agenda this afternoon for a possible vote. We need to review the markup, and we may be able to vote it out today.
Okay, and then it'll go to at least approach.
Then it'll go to the vote.
So see it to the floor maybe later this week or next week. Any questions on this bill? Let's see if it's working.
Yeah, Rev. Austin from Caucus. I'm just wondering if you look at possibility of using the funds to buy farm insurance. And I don't know if farms can have insurance or not, but I just was wondering if you took testimony on that.
Yeah, we took quite a bit of testimony on the insurance question. So yes, so there are insurance options available. It doesn't mean they're necessarily accessible or affordable. And by accessible, I mean many of them are run through USDA. And for those of you who don't know, Vermont's USDA employee count has gone down in the past 3 months, somewhat dramatically. But aside from that, I think it's always been historically challenging to get that insurance and expensive. It's particularly hard for small farmers who aren't planting commodity crops like corn or soybeans. And we did hear testimony that some people do have insurance, some people don't. The way the bill is structured, any benefit you might get from this fund would take into account insurance payments you might be getting. So it won't be, double dipping is not probably a good expression here, but it won't be giving somebody 2 payments for the same loss.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you, and we'll look forward to seeing it on the floor. Next, we have, Jack James talk about the solar bill.
Indeed. Hi, everybody. So we, our committee has been working on, I'm Representative Kathleen James from Manchester. And the House Energy and Digital Infrastructure Committee has been working on a pretty narrow solar bill called S50. And basically what it addresses is the process by which small ground-mounted residential solar arrays, so the kind that you would put in your backyard, are permitted. And folks may not know that these arrays, when you put them in, they do go through a certificate of public good process with the Public Utility Commission, just like larger arrays do. But it's an expedited process, and it amounts basically to like a registration, because these, excuse me, because these arrays are so small and they're in somebody's backyard. So there's this expedited registration process, and basically your solar installer, and for any of us who have solar, you might remember this, your solar installer comes to you with the paperwork and you sign a bunch of things and they go over a bunch of things and you check some boxes, and then it heads off to the PUC, and they notify the utilities, and the utilities have a little window of time to respond in case they see any problems. And then tick, it's done, and your paperwork is ready to go. And during that process, you can also decide whether to retain your REC, your tradable renewable energy credit, which I will get into a little bit more on the floor, I promise, or not. Or you can basically turn that REC over to the utility, and the utility wants those RECs, right? And most folks who are putting up solar on their in their yard aren't in the business of trading renewable energy credits on the REC market. So most of us, the vast majority of us, turn those right over to the utility, and we sign paperwork saying we're going to do that, and boom, you're done. So for a long time, this process has applied to ground-mounted residential arrays that are 15 kilowatts or smaller. But technology has evolved, and what's really interesting is that for the same, roughly the same physical size of that 15 kilowatt array, you can now put in an array that generates more juice, and it's not much bigger physically. So what we want to do is change this process to change with the changing times and with changing technology. And so basically what we've done is go through all the places in statute that it talks about this process for 15 kilowatts, and we boosted it to 25 kilowatts. So basically you can now put a 25 kilowatt, if this bill passes, excuse me, you can put a 25 kilowatt array, up to a 25 kilowatt array in your yard, on a pole, ground mounted, and still qualify for this expedited registration process. So as you go through the bill, for those who want to read it, you can see a bunch of places where basically we just changed 15 to 25. We asked the Public Utilities Commission to update its rules to reflect this change from 15 to 25. To let folks start doing that right away before their rulemaking takes a little bit of time. 15 to 25. And then another thing that we did, the Senate setbacks apply to solar arrays. And the Senate had put in some language saying that these residential arrays should abide by each town's setbacks for towns that have setbacks. And the League of Cities and Towns and other folks we learned about through testimony found that to be pretty confusing. That was going to be a town-by-town setback process, which sounded, I think, confusing and logistically challenging to people. So we added a 10-foot setback, minimum statewide all across the state, just a uniform setback. So wherever you're going to put in one of these 25 kilowatt things in your yard, it has to be 10 feet back from the road and 10 feet back from the property line. We took a decent amount of testimony on that to make sure that 10 feet was going to be okay with the league, and try to avoid, disputes between neighbors, not be confusing And I think we landed on a good place with that as well. Let's see here. I mentioned earlier that when you put in a residential solar array, you actually get renewable energy credits. Folks who are familiar with the renewable energy standard know what that is. I mentioned that most folks just give those away to the utilities. The utilities want them. Sometimes the solar installer makes a mistake on the paperwork. And when that happens, it can be very difficult to get that rectified. So for example, if I accidentally retained my rec and I am not benefiting, from net metering rates or all the things that come with giving my rec to the utility, I'm going to want to change that. We're allowing folks 120 days to change that once. So it's not in perpetuity. You can't be swapping your recs back and forth with utility, but you do have 4 months to look at your bill. It'll go through a couple of billing cycles and be like, wait, this isn't what my solar installer told me was going to be happening. This doesn't look quite right. You can go and change that one time at the PUC. There was a bit of sort of unnecessary red tape, we thought. When the certificate of public good was allotted or given or awarded under this process, the certificate holder had to record a notice of their certificate in the land records of the town. Great. It should be so. And then they had to submit proof that they had recorded it to the PUC. And we felt that was duplicative. This dates back from way before the times when you could go to the PUC in their ePUC system and just look up a certificate of public good. So it's creating a lot of paperwork and kind of enforcement problems for the PUC because they had to keep going to towns and saying like, did you file? Did you file? You forgot to file. So we eliminated something that we felt wasn't necessary and was a red tape deal. So that's the bulk of the bill. One thing that we almost bogged down in until we found an elegant solution was the definition of a plant. So that moves us into an area of larger solar arrays, for the most part under 5 megawatts that a utility would maybe build, right? To be kind of building little solar arrays around to generate distributed solar energy and feed the grid. That's a good thing, I think we all think. In order to build these under and qualify under the net metering program, standard offer, tier 2 to their size restrictions, so utilities installers can't build big ones. And what we learned through testimony is that the way plant, in other words, a bigger solar array, is defined in statute right now, might be having the effect of making it harder or putting some red tape in place of utilities being able to build several of these in a site where they've already got one. So if you've already got one and you want to put a couple more next to it, so imagine a field that's already been disturbed. There's already solar there, there's already an access road, there's already the poles and the wires. Logic says that's a place where we're probably going to want to maybe do another couple of those. And there's some arguing and wrangling about whether the way we define plant in statute is correct or whether it's hampering that ability. And so after taking a ton of testimony, we decided to let the PUC take a look at it and come back to us in December. They're going to work with stakeholders, including solar installers, and come back to us with some recommendations in December. And that, folks, is that.
And has it been voted out? And when
Oh,
do you
that.
expect it?
That is not that. We're going to vote it out on Friday. So it should be on the floor next week. And we really have taken a lot of testimony on this bill. We have worked really hard in our committee to try to find consensus. And although one never knows, I am anticipating that we'll have a unanimous vote out of committee on this.
No, he just thinks. Hopefully that's the case. Any questions? Yes.
Difficult questions we will be answering later. So go ahead, Rep. Mahaly.
Mark Mahaly, Washington. Two questions. I'll ask them both. One, when you surrender your rec to the utility, do you get compensated?
I don't think, you don't get,
You get a lower rate.
you get a lower rate. It's what qualifies you for the lower rate. You don't get cash, right, Bram? Yeah.
Yeah, but, well, okay. Second of all, does this apply only to projects that are run through your meter, as in net metered, or also, like I have 15 kilowatts that just goes right to the pole as its own meter and it sells it back to the grid?
An act relating to increasing the size of solar net metering projects.
Okay.
But I'll get clarity on that. I think it's just net metering, but I could be wrong.
Any other questions?
Very simple question, Charlie Kimball from Woodstock. Using the windows as a size, how big is 25?
So
How many of that?
I'll tell you something funny, not funny. In the middle of the night, I woke up and I was like, oh, I need to remember what that square footage is. But that was 3:30 in the morning, and then I didn't remember that again until just now.
Stay tuned.
Yeah,
3 windows,
stay tuned.
3
It's,
windows, 3 windows.
yeah.
It also varies by inverters.
Oh, and it varies by inverters, but the answer to that, Rep. Kimball, is sitting over there, right there in my manila folder, which by next week is gonna be an elegant floor report.
So good.
Yeah, I knew the answer to that yesterday,
Yeah.
and I'll know it again next week, but I'll get that to you. And if folks have other questions, please feel free to come to me. We have a ton of information on this, and yeah, if you imagine a typical residential ground mounted array that you would see in somebody's yard or home, it's that. That is what we're talking about.
Any other questions before we wrap up? Okay, so that is gonna cover us for this caucus, and